Okay, so today will be the last part of Chapter 8. This is something called Law of Sines. The thing that is nice about this is that Law of Sines works with any triangle. So it doesn't have to be a right triangle. I can always solve for an angle or a side, just like I do with these. So the way that this works out is that on the top, I'm just going to write a proportion. On the top is going to be sine of the angle. And then on the bottom is going to be the side that is across. And I can just write it as a proportion with one variable to solve for. For example, here I've got sine of A over top of A. And so that is the sine of this angle A over top of the side that's across from it. Remember that across, just like we talked about with trig, is going to be the one that is opposite from. Same thing if I were to do so sine of B over top of side that's across from B, which it ends up being lowercase b in this case. And so what I can do is I can find missing pieces here. So in this first example on the left side of your notes, I can name this piece X and this piece Y. And so to write in a proportion, I need to have only one variable. So for this one, one of my variables, or one of my sides, my proportions, has to contain angle B, and then the side that's across from it, which is 15. So I can go sine of 93 is over top of the side that's across from it, which is 15, is equal to, and then, if I want to solve for X here, I'm going to use the angle that's across from X, so I'm going to go sine of 48 over top of X. And so what I can do is I can go ahead and cross multiply. When I cross multiply, I get 15 times the sine of 48 is equal to the sine of 93 times X. Easiest way to do this is just to keep it just like I wrote there, and then to solve for X, I can go ahead and divide both sides by the sine of 93. And this is one big calculation that I can plug into my calculator. So I get X is equal to, and then when I actually plug this in, I can go 15 times the sine of 48. Make sure that you close your parentheses and then divide it by the sine of 93. And I end up with 11.16, which I can round to 11.2. There's my X. And then I can do the same thing to figure out what Y is equal to. If I wanted to figure out what Y was equal to, again, I would still use the 93 and the 15. I'd still use the same left-hand side. So I could go the sine of 93 over top of 15 is equal to, and then on the other side, if I want to figure out what Y is, I need to figure out what this angle is first. Again, all triangles add up to 180, so I can do 180 minus 93 minus 48 to figure out the missing angle, which is 39. So on the other side, I can go sine of 39 over top of Y. Again, across from the 39-degree angle is Y. That's why they go together in the proportion. Once I'm there, then I can go ahead and cross multiply. So I get sine of 93 times Y is equal to 15 times the sine of 39. Divide both sides by sine of 93. So I get Y is equal to, and then when I do that, again, just make sure that after your 39 you close your parentheses of both of those. If you leave it open, it'll give you a bad answer. So when I do 15 times the sine of 39 divided by the sine of 93, I get 9.45, so it rounds up to 9.5. Just like that. I can do the same thing to find an angle like we'll do in this problem, this next problem over here. And so again, I still want to write my proportion. I want to write my proportion with the two numbers. So one side I have to have two numbers for this one. I can have 120 and 18. So So I can go sine of 120 over top of 18 is equal to, and then again, if I want to figure out what s is across from 11, and so I can go sine of s over top of 11. Still do the same thing, cross multiply. 11 times the sine of 120 is equal to the sine of s times 18. Again, I want to figure out what s is equal to so I can divide both sides by 18. And this is where this gets a little bit weird. So when I do that, I'm going to get the sine of s is equal to, and it's going to give me some decimal. 0.53 is what it ends up being, someplace like that. So the way that I think that I want you to do it is I want you to be able to just take the unrounded answer and then find the angle. So this one gives me 0.53, so on and so forth. And so what I'm going to show you how to do is in your calculator how to use that unrounded decimal and to plug it back in. Because whenever I want to find a angle, if you remember from when we did it before, I have to do the second sign and then put in the previous answer, that long rounded, non-rounded decimal. And so what we're going to do is on our calculator, so on here, again, I'm going to do that previous calculation. So I'm going to go, let's see, sine of 120, close my parenthesis, times 11, divided by 18. So that gives me that point. Oops, I'm in radians, that's my fault. There we go. So degrees, there we go, that's better. I'll redo that last calculation. There we go, 0.53. So it gives me 0.529. And so what I want to do is I want to take the second sign, so I'm going to hit second and then the sign button. Again, just like we talked about. And then to put the previous answer in, I can hit the second button and then the negative sign. And then I'll take the previous unrounded decimal and plug it in. Then I can hit enter. And so that'll give me a decimal of 31.95, so I'll round it up to 32. So again, that was second sign because I'm finding an angle, and then to plug in the previous answer, I hit second and then the negative sign. So when I get there, I get the angle S is equal to 32 degrees. So again, if I know that this is 32 degrees, then I can find the rest by knowing that the triangle adds up to 180. 180 minus 120 minus 32, that gives me angle T is equal to 28 degrees. Okay. The bottom part of your notes, whenever I'm just given something like this, I can just I can draw my triangle and then figure it out from there. So here's my triangle. It doesn't really matter how you draw it. KLM. It says LM is 9. It says KM is 14. And angle L is 105. And so I want to figure out what angle K is. So again, I'm going to use these because these guys are across from each other. I'm going to use these two as one side of my proportion. So sine of 105 over top of 14 is equal to sine of k, looks like sync, over top of 9. Do the same thing, cross multiply. So I get the sine of 105 times 9 is equal to 14 times the sine of k, and then divide both sides by 14. So I get that the sine of k is equal to, again, when I do that, I get sine of 105 times 9 divided by 14. I get 0.620 dot 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 dot. So again, I'm finding an angle, so I'm going to go second sine. So second sine, and then inside I want to get the previous answer, which is by hitting second and then the negative sign. When I do that, I get angle K is equal to 38.385. So I'm going to go 38.4 degrees. If I wanted to figure out what angle K is, then I could go ahead and, or if I wanted to figure out what KL is, if I want to call this, let's say, like X right here, then I could go ahead and do the same thing. So I know that angle K is 38.4, and so I'd have to figure out the last angle to figure out what angle X is. So I could go 180 minus 38.4 minus 105. That gives me this is 36.6. Again, I have to use the two numbers that I have highlighted in blue, the 105 degree angle and the 14, and then I could use the 36.6 degree angle and X. And so for the second one, to figure out the second part, to figure out what that missing side is, I can go same thing, sine of 105 over top of 14 is equal to sine of K over top of 9. Cross multiply, get sine of 105 times 9 is equal to the sine of K times 14, and then divide both sides by 14. Whoops, I screwed that up. I was finding K again, my fault. My right-hand side should be finding out what X is, so I should go sine of 36.6, and then the bottom should be my X. Sorry. So when I do that, I get 14 times the sine of 36.6 is equal to the sine of 105 times X. So I can divide both sides by the sine of 105. So when I do that, I go 14 times the sine of 36.6, and then divide it by the sine of 105. Again, just remember to end your parentheses after, especially the top one. And so when I do that, I get X is equal to 8.64, so 8.6. Go ahead and flip over to the back of your notes. On the back, it's talking about finding the distance to a ship. So with this problem, I could figure out what X and Y are. Name X and Y. Figure out, again, 180 minus 70 minus 52 to figure out the missing angle is 58. And then I could write my proportions from there. I'm going to go ahead and do the last two problems and skip this one because I believe that this one we are able to do. And it's the same as all the other ones. Write a proportion with these two together, and then X and 52. Once you've done that, write a proportion with, again, 40 and 58 degrees, and then 70 and Y. So the last